Okay, perfect.
So welcome, Lisa. It's great to have you on the show today.
It's such a pleasure. This is my favorite topic,
Yes.
female
So
entrepreneurs.
yeah, we're going to talk all about entrepreneurship and sales in particular, which is brilliant. And I love that you're not just about sales, that you have this noble purpose. And we've heard from guests all the time on the show that it's so important to be true to yourself. So I love your authentic approach to selling, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that in a moment. But before we start, could you perhaps tell the audience how you came to be in this position? How did you start out on your own in the first place?
So I've gotten to the point now in my life where I'm in my 50s where I'm really honest about how I started my company. I used to kind of hedge around it, but I started my own company over 20 years ago for two reasons. I had a baby and I worked for a jerk. And I I was a VP of sales for this company. I had a baby, was going back to work, and but it had to be, I see in hindsight, it had to be both of those things at the same time. Because earlier I had this great boss who I loved, and our jerk boss ended up letting my great boss go. And I realized if I'd have just had the baby, I probably would have gone back if I had the great boss. And if I'd have just had the jerk boss, but not had the baby, I probably would have slogged it out. So I started my own consulting firm a year after I had a baby over 20 years ago. And I wanted to have more control over my schedule. I wanted to maintain my heart, and I was feeling that eroded. And the reason I share this is a lot of times when we hear the entrepreneur journey, we hear this big idea and I was going to change the world. And that's great if you've got that. But I also think it's helpful to hear other stories that say, like mine, I just wanted to make a living and not work 80 hours a week for a jerk. And so I thought, well, I'll go out on my own consulting and maybe that'll work. And it grew into something very large, but the journey from, deciding I was going to go out on my own to a seven-figure business involved a lot of gut-wrenching tears at night thinking, I hate my life. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, I think we could all relate to those moments.
Yeah.
So, when you started your business, how did the reality of running your business match up with what you thought it was going to be like?
So, one of the advantages that I had in running my business was I was a sales consultant. So, I knew how to sell. And I didn't have a lot of the weirdness that a lot of women have where they're all angsty about selling. The challenge that I found was really twofold. There are two distinct challenges. One was selling myself
Mm.
because I knew how to sell, but I was used to selling someone else's consulting and selling a company. And so, like I said, I really knew how to sell, but when it came to the product was me, that felt a little weird. And all those female voices in my head about don't be bold, don't brag, all that came forth. The second challenge that I had was the administration piece, to be quite candid with you. And for some people, that's not a challenge. For me, that was a huge, huge challenge. I loved being with customers. I loved doing the work. I got over my anxiety about selling myself, which is part of why I ended up writing the book, Selling with Noble Purpose. But the admin work remained the bane of my existence until I could finally make enough money to hire it out, which upon reflection, I should have done much earlier and I would have made more money faster if I could have gotten rid of that. And that's
Yeah,
me. That's the thing I'm really bad at.
yeah, I can relate to that. I'm just much more in the creative space and love helping people and getting out there and creating
That's
the
right.
next new thing. And then, oh, well, I have to track my receipts. What?
Right.
It's,
Those expense reports would just sit forever undone. That was one thing that really held me back in the early years, that if I had to do it differently, I would hire out my weaknesses and play to my strengths more.
yeah. So if you were to go back and give yourself some advice and to hire out sooner, how do you think you might help your earlier self to get comfortable with that idea of hiring out help before you can necessarily be comfortable that you can always pay for them?
Well, one thing you have to recognize is you've got to scale in advance of your growth. Your growth is only going to move at the pace that you move. And so if you're holding back, if you're worried, and again, I don't recommend anybody go deeply into debt and don't, finance the whole things on credit cards. But if you can hire away the things that are sucking your energy, it will make a big difference to you. And, now we have a company, it's still a small consulting firm, but we work with companies all around the world, and that's the other thing you have to recognize, depending on what type of business you're starting. Right now, we have a business that has only 3 employees, including me. We have several subcontractors, but we run a $1 million plus business and have big name clients. So a lot of times we think we have to have this big thing to be doing big high impact work. And depending on your model, if you're selling ice cream cones, you're going to have a lot of employees probably. But if you're doing some sort of service based business, you don't necessarily need a big staff, because we very effectively have run this business for a decade at that level.
Yeah, that's really encouraging to hear because, as you say, I think that some people can hold themselves back thinking, oh, I'm not big enough yet, or
Mhm.
when I have a team of 50, then I'll be able to approach these big clients. But in fact, it's not necessarily the case. And now you're getting a new wave of virtual employee who are very highly qualified, because unfortunately, that's the world we're living in now, that there is a lot of people on the market with these incredible skills. So you have a bit more scope in building out that virtual team as well, I think now.
You do. And there's something about women that I've noticed. It feels like I shouldn't be hiring things out. And you see it show up where women say like silly stuff like, I shouldn't hire house cleaners. I should do it myself. Well, you're wrong. Those people need the job and you need to stop doing that. And I look at the difference between men and women when they start a business. And a man will say, well, I need the best equipment, I need the best people. And a woman will say, well, I'll just see how it goes until I get it to a certain level. And then maybe if I do well enough, I'll reward myself with some additional resources. And that's not the way you want to think. Having said that, women have a huge, huge advantage when they start their own business, and it's actually twofold. One, women think more holistically and they think about how one thing impacts the other. So you can see the big picture better. And the other thing that you have, which is probably why a lot of your listeners started your business, is you can see what's underneath what people are saying. And so many women businesses, including mine, were started not just because there was a need in the market that was going underserved, but because there was an inarticulated need that the women, through their intuition, could see underneath what customers were saying and identify, what they really need is this. And so women stereotypically and traditionally, and in my experience, factually, have a big advantage in that way. And so you really want to lean into that.
Yeah, and I think that also builds into this need for women to trust their gut instinct. I think it's been taught out of us a little bit, but
It
it's so
has.
important to listen to your intuition, your energy, because it tells you so much about what's the right next step for you to take, and yeah, when to do things. You know it all. And
You
I'm
do.
always speaking with female entrepreneurs, and there's no lack of talent. They have it all. It's just sometimes having that little bit more courage, that little bit more trust in themselves, and that's just something that comes with time. There's no magic pill, I don't think, for that.
It does come with time, but you want to speed up your confidence curve. And so one of the things that really helped me was when I realized your intuition is the sum of all your other senses. And
Mm.
I'll give you an example. We have an American finance guy named Dave Ramsey. He was on stage one time talking to an audience of like 1,000 people, and in it were many couples. And he's a personal finance guy. And he said, this is a 60-something-year-old man, a picture of the patriarchy. Like, that's him. And he said to all the men in the crowd, he said, if you go interview a financial planner and you should take your wife with you. And if you leave that office and she says, I don't know, I just don't like him, You run the other direction because she does not need to explain herself. She does not need to give you facts because she is picking up on something totally different, on the undercurrent of feelings in the room, and she's right. Listen to her. And so I heard that 10 years ago. And I think I would shift this conversation to sales. And so many women think they're not good at sales, and they're actually great at it for
Mm.
that very reason I just said. Because you understand the unspoken needs, you want to help people, you understand what's going on underneath the conversation, and don't think for a minute that those things make you less of a business person. They make you a freaking rock star, and they make you great at sales, and it's what's already innate within you.
Yeah. So why do you think that women tend to have this feeling that instinctively that, oh, I'm no good at sales, this kind of knee-jerk reaction? Is there anything you've noticed that causes that?
Sales is one of the few professions where we let the people who do it badly define the profession. So we all know there's bad teachers out there. Teaching is a noble profession. Some people just aren't very good at it. We know that there's bad doctors, there's bad mental health counselors, all kinds of great professions. There are a group of people that aren't good at it, that shouldn't be doing it. But yet in sales, the people who actually are not good at it, and tell you about the research, the people who are not good at it are the pushy, aggressive, all about me people. That's who we think of when we think of salespeople. But our data tells us, in a study of over 100 companies, our data tells us that salespeople who have what we call noble purpose, who truly want to make a difference to their customers, who improve life for customers, actually sell bigger deals, they sell higher margin deals, and they hold on to their customers longer. And so I think why women have such a negative perception of sales is we have had salespeople that aren't very good at their job call on us, and
Yeah.
we don't want to be like them. And so the good news is, even if that was your experience, you should know that those people that act like that are in the bottom 50% of performers consistently.
Yeah. And I guess with those people who do give you a great sales experience, you probably don't even notice.
You don't think of it as sales, you
Yeah.
think of it as service. And so it's this weird dynamic where you think, oh, well, they weren't really salesy because they weren't pushy. And so words only mean what we think they mean. And so I want to draw a line in the sand right now that those people were pushy, and that pushy does not equal salesy. That the essence of sales is about helping people take action in a way that will better themselves. That is the essence of sales, because if your customer can tell that you're only going to make recommendations that are good for them, and that you're not going to recommend something that's not good for them, if they can tell that and they are reading you, you will have so much more success. And I oftentimes, when people say, well, I don't want to talk someone into something that they don't want to do, I say, do you really think you're that good? That you do you really think that you can make someone do something they don't actually want to do? Because most people aren't that good. But it's part of it socialized in us, in women, especially if you are the product, to feel like, well, I don't want to go in and say, I'm so great, I'm so great. And the good news is you don't have to. You can let your customers speak for you. You can say, when I was working, and that's one thing that we do very effectively in our business. I think we are effective with it now. So we say, when we were working with this software company, they doubled revenue and were voted a best place to work as a result of doing business with us. They won best place to work awards, and they doubled their revenue. Let's talk about whether or not we could do that for you. So then we're not talking about how great we are, we're just stating the facts. And then we're talking about, let's talk about whether or not we could do that. We might not be able to, and if we don't, we'll leave.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think I learned that quite early on when I was doing my communication consultancy, that, I didn't like speaking about myself at all. But I just made it about the work. So what are
Mhm.
you looking for here? And what results are you looking? And well, how's that tie into this? Okay, great. Well, do you want me to get started with this? And I just leave my bit out altogether. I just talked
Right.
about the what results they were looking for, and then they're like, yeah, great. And I didn't realize that that was kind of sales at the
That
time.
is that's what we're trying to teach salespeople who do talk about themselves all the time, that the way you just described is much more effective. And the data proves that out. And I think one of the things that I would challenge every entrepreneur to go back to is, why did you start this in the first place? So if I look back on myself when I started my business over 20 years ago, the initial blush was because I hate my boss and I have a baby. But there's lots of things I could have done. I could have been a stay at home mom. I could have started a decorating business. I could have, I don't know, become a teacher. I could have done a bunch of things. But why did I choose this particular lane? And it's because I knew that helping salespeople make money and make a difference at the same time was a noble thing. It was my calling. And so, what I would ask the entrepreneurs listening to, you might have started your business because you had no choice, because you got fired, whatever, but you had choices about what you did. And why did you choose what you do? How do you make a difference to customers? When you can reset yourself to that, that's what rekindles your fire.
Great advice. I love that. So I want to come to your book, Selling with Noble Purpose. What does that mean exactly?
So, selling with noble purpose means that your North Star is to make a difference to your customers. And so if you think about business on a bell curve, you've got the ineffective businesses that don't set any goals and don't have good systems and are just a big fat sloppy mess. And if you're listening right now and that's you, we know you can do better and we're going to get you there fast. The second type of business, which is the more common business, is a business where they set financial targets and you've got good systems in place. And you can run a very good business in that way. But that upper echelon, that far end of the bell curve, that 10% of businesses, the studies tell us that those businesses have a purpose bigger than money. And they measure their money and they have good systems and they do all that. But when you have a purpose bigger than money, here's what the data tells us: organizations with a purpose bigger than money outperform the market by over 350%. Salespeople, as I said, who sell with noble purpose, who truly want to make a difference to customers, sell bigger deals. And here's the important thing for the time we're in: when you have a purpose bigger than yourself, bigger than money, you're more resilient and you have more tenacity and you stay the course over time. And that's really important now, because if you're just waking up every day thinking, oh my God, I have to go do this thing, oh, again, your customers are going to feel it.
Yeah, I used to dread my sales calls because I always felt like, yeah, well, I felt uncomfortable. So for sure,
Mhm.
the client was going to feel uncomfortable
Right.
in my coaching business, that is. But as soon as I learned the skills, and as you say, it started to take the higher purpose. So my sales calls aren't really sales calls. I don't see them that way at all. It's more like, okay, well, let's help this person move forward in their business, get more confidence in where they're going, and understand that. And if it makes sense for us to work together towards those goals and we have a good relationship, great, let's talk about that later. But
Then let's talk about it.
let's
Yeah.
move them forward first. And I see that not everyone jumps in straight away, but they always remember that call really fondly, and we stay in
Mhm.
contact, and then they come back around when they're ready. But it's since I've shifted my focus to more that sales service and coaching approach, I love the calls, and I really look forward to getting to know someone and really understanding, well, can I help this person and what way would be best? And it's really a whole nother experience. So I think it's when you enjoy that process and it feels good to you, then it's going to feel great for the client as
It
well.
it absolutely does. And when we are subconsciously reading each other all the time, that's where the intuition comes in, that women are tend to be really good at it. But we're reading the other person. And so one of the things that we teach entrepreneurs, because I've coached a lot of entrepreneurs as they're moving to try and scale their business, is you need to be able to answer three questions about your business. How do you make a difference? How do you make a difference to your customers? How do you do it differently than your competition? And you may have a better process or a better widget, or it may just be you're more fun. Like, how do you do it differently? It can be a lot of different things. And then the third thing is on your best day, what do you love about your job? So, as an entrepreneur, you want to answer those three questions for yourself. And that's where you'll find your noble purpose. And that then becomes the driving force of everything you do.
I love that. And always teaching people that, until you have, as you say, your that complete clarity around what's important to you, how you create real value for other people in ways that brings you joy, and
Mhm.
how that and where those two things align is where you need to be building your business and everything, making every decision, which is just as you were saying, it's finding that higher purpose and meaning.
Right.
And I think that's what really works for women, especially, is knowing that I'm not doing this selfishly, but I'm really contributing to society. And when I worked in corporate, I had a women's network that I ran, and I did a lot of research into what makes women tick, what does it take for women to reach those
Mhm.
higher levels, and that sense of contribution is really important.
It is
Women
so
don't go
important.
to work at the same. For men, it's a status. It's just historically they work, they're the breadwinner, they have this title that's really important for them. But for women, it's more about using their skills and talents to make a difference for other people, and to
Mhm.
have that sense of community. So I think it's really important to tap into what what does that mean for you.
What does it mean for you?
And I love your way of encapsulating that as a noble purpose. That's fantastic.
Well, one thing you might be surprised to learn is that most of my work and my team's work is with big companies that are 80% male dominated. And I'll tell you why. Because you said something interesting that men are sort of used to going and being the breadwinner. And that may be true, but we are having an existential crisis right now.
Yes.
If you've ever experienced one of those stop dead in your tracks crises, maybe you lose a parent, maybe you have a health scare, and you start to think, who am I and why am I here? That's what everyone's doing right now.
Mm.
And while that is happening, we also have a growing chorus of customers asking, are you here to help me? Or are you just trying to close me? And so the majority of the work that we do is with large companies because what they're trying to do is unleash that spirit that already exists in a lot of entrepreneurs, which is, I'm going to change the world. I'm making a difference. I'm so excited. And they need to unleash that in their people all the way across the organization. And so for a lot of your listeners, that might be why they're in their business in the first place. And it's sort of innate to them. For other people, it's not as clear and present. And one of the things we know about human beings, regardless of gender, socioeconomic, nationality, human beings, once we get beyond food and shelter, there's two things we want. We want belonging, which is we want to be part of something, and we want meaning. We want significance. We want to know that our part matters. We want to be connected to something bigger than ourselves, the belonging, and the significance is we want to know that our contribution matters. And so companies all over the world are seeing if we don't give that to our people, if we don't instill that in our people, next year they're all going to be listening to your show because they all went out and started their own businesses because they said, forget it. I've had it with this place.
Yes, yes, exactly. So coming back to women with smaller businesses who perhaps don't quite feel comfortable with sales yet, or maybe they're having a lot of calls, but it's not working yet. How how would someone go about designing their ideal sales process?
Okay. So the first thing you need to know is where I'm coming from on this. Selling with noble purpose is not only a methodology to experience more meaning and close more business, it's also the way I sold my way out of a bankruptcy. And when I say bankruptcy, I don't mean figuratively. I literally mean 10 years ago, my husband lost his business and we had to declare bankruptcy and we had no money. So if you're listening to this and you're having heart palpitations because you don't know how you're going to make your rent or your mortgage next month, I have been there. So the first thing you need to do as you look at your own sales process is there's two things you need to get out of your sales process that are probably in them in ways that you don't know. Number one is fear. You have to take fear off the table. The second thing you have to take away, closely related to fear, is your desire to close. So I know that you probably have both of those. You don't have to eliminate them entirely. What you do want to do is go, as you're thinking about your sales process, go park them in a corner right now and just ask them to be quiet for the next 10 minutes because they're not going to be helpful right now. And so, what you want to do is you want to work backwards and you want to think about if you have existing customers, great. How did you make a difference to them? If you don't, imagine your ideal customer. And rather than thinking about how big the number is that you're going to close, that you need to close, I want you to think about what would the impact be on them. And so, for example, I had a room full of consultants one time that I was training in this model, and I divided them in half. And I said, okay, half of you are trying to figure out how to create $1 million consulting firm. The other half of you are going to be charged with delivering $10 million in value to clients. Which group do you think was more creative?
Oh, the one delivering value for sure.
That's right, of course. And so that's where you want your head to be. Then, where you work backwards from that, and there's a list of things in the book from how to open a call to how to ask the discovery questions. We wrote Selling with Noble Purpose so that it was really clear and you could do it on your own. But once you've identified how you make a difference to clients, then it becomes more clear who would my best clients be? Who are the people that would really value this? And what areas of conversation will we need to have? Not just, hey, I can help you with this, but what's the presenting business problem that, as they would see it, that would cause them to go, yeah, I'll have a conversation with you. So in our case, our purpose is twofold. We help leaders drive revenue and do work that makes them proud. So when organizations are looking to drive exponential revenue growth and exponential meaning and confidence in their team, that's where we come in. But we don't start there. We start by asking, so what are your revenue goals? How are you set to achieve them? How do you want to go about that? And I hope people are catching the nuance of that. That it's what is the area that you as a business are impacting that you can improve on. And then rather than going in and telling how you do that, you want to ask questions about how the client is navigating that now. And that's what will open the door to figure out if you can be helpful.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's such valuable advice. Thank you. And you always have to remember that you have to meet the client where they are,
Right.
not where you know they are or where you want to take them, because if you don't meet them where they are right now, you're not going to make that connection to help them take the next steps, and to trust that you are the right person to
That you're
guide
the
them.
right person. That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly. And so often I've had sales calls with people and they just go on telling me about one aspect of what they do, which I'm just really not interested in. And
Right.
I was like, well, I was actually really wanted to know about this bit here. And then, oh, well, we're kind of out of time now. I've got another call. Or
Yeah.
it's like, oh, but this bit's more interesting. Like, well, not to me.
Yeah.
um,
Well, one of the things that I always ask clients on an early call is what was interesting about our content that you thought might be helpful to you? Because people have a choice of whether or not to take the meeting.
yeah.
So ask them up front. I'm really appreciative of the time. What and you took this meeting for a reason. What do you think I could be helpful with? Like just ask. And it's so much easier and it's so much more natural for us to ask that way, and it puts them at ease. And I don't mean you need to say, oh, this is wide open, it's whatever you want, but it's asking, what about my content, my website, my email, whatever it was, what made you take the meeting, what did you think would be interesting here, and let's make sure we focus on that.
Mm. So when it comes to sales conversations, I know it's really important to maintain the control of that conversation. And the best way to do that is to ask questions. And I
Yes.
remember when I was at corporate, I left my corporate career because I had my daughter, but I actually had the most amazing boss. So I was really gutted to leave that, but I didn't have childcare, so it wasn't an option to return anyway. But he once challenged me. He's like, right, your next meeting, go in and only ask questions. I was like,
Mhm.
seriously? He said, yeah, it's an amazing exercise. You'll find out so much. It's just an incredible skill. And it was so hard.
It
It
is
was just
hard.
almost impossible to just ask questions and not jump in and give opinions and try and solve things too soon. Do you have any advice on how to manage that, how to manage the call?
One thing that has helped me a lot that I always tell people is ask two more questions than you think you need to, which is a little easier step than what your boss suggested. And so, one of the questions, so in Selling with Noble Purpose, there's 10 questions, and it's not a script because you insert your own content, but it's a framework. So, an example would be if some leader told me, I've got to increase revenue by 50% next year. One question you could ask would be, what impact will it have on your organization if you do that? What happens if you don't? Like, those are two simple questions that if a client tells you, and it'd be so easy if a client says, well, I've got to do better with our advertising, or I've got to increase sales, or I've got to have a better website, whatever you're selling, that you go, oh, goody, that's me, that's me. If you ask, what happens if you achieve that? And what happens if you don't? What you will be doing is you will be generating more urgency for solving it and more urgency to avoid the negative impact of not solving it.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not asking those to be manipulative because they can come up with their own answer. And if they say, well, nobody cares whether we do it or not, then I go, well, that's not probably something you want to hire me to help you with.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly. Asking those questions, as you say, you get that sense of urgency. You get them to really appreciate their need, which sometimes they don't identify strongly enough. So you're really helping them with that. But at the same time, as you say, if they just like, well, it doesn't matter if we don't achieve this, then you're
well,
also knowing, okay, well, that's not the thing I can help you with, and move
it's
on
not.
to either something else or another client.
And so I'll give you an example that most women can relate to. Like, I've been trying to get myself healthier over the last couple of years, and with COVID, I really doubled down on it. So if someone was a health coach and they were calling on me, and I said, "Oh yeah, I want to get healthier," and they asked, "What's the impact if you do get healthier?" I'm going to think about that in a different way, and I'm going to say, "Well, I guess I would. Gosh, I'd have more energy for my life. I'd probably feel better. What's the impact if you don't?" Well, I'm in my 50s. I guess I'll just turn into one of those blob people that doesn't do anything. And now all of a sudden I'm going, holy crap, I have to solve this problem right now. And you didn't make me think that, but you pointed me towards thinking more reflectively about something that was at the top of my mind. And so you made an interesting comment that I want to go back to for folks when you said you want to keep control of it. A lot of people think you keep control of it by talking the whole time. But what you want is the customer's goals and challenges are guiding the conversation, but you're the one guiding it, using what they've told you to guide it. It's a nuanced difference, but that's what Selling with Noble Purpose is all about, is you confidently stepping into that conversation with the customer, knowing that you're going to surface their goals and challenges, and you're going to use those because you're a helpful person. You're going to use those to guide a conversation where if you can help them, you're also getting them excited about that, about the possibility of you helping them.
Yeah. Amazing advice. Thank you so much. So your book, Selling with Noble Purpose, you mentioned that you work mainly with larger businesses. Is that relevant for entrepreneurs as well?
Absolutely. And the reason we work with larger businesses is they need help scaling it. But I do want to say something to entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of examples in the book of entrepreneurs who have used this and become huge businesses as a result. But I want to say one of the reasons why it's important for entrepreneurs is if you're a solopreneur, you have to have such clarity of purpose so that you can navigate all the different roles and things that you do. And if you are someone that has two or three employees, the reason you need clarity of purpose is because they can't know what's in your heart unless you tell them. And people are desperate to be part of something bigger than themselves. So if you've got two or three people, even if they're subcontractors, like I can tell you right now, our web guy who's a subcontractor knows what our purpose is, and that everything we do with him is about, is this going to be helpful to help clients drive more revenue and get more emotional engagement? And so even if you have subcontractors, you don't even have any employees, you need that clarity of purpose so that it's not just farming out these little pieces of work. You're creating your own community around you of people who know that we're doing something that matters here out in the world.
Yeah, exactly. And I just love what you've said there, because understanding your purpose and using that as your guiding light for everything you do, every decision you make in your business, and making sure that everyone around you and associated with your business has that same instinct is so, so important. Save you so much heartache, so
Oh,
much
well.
wasted time and resources. It's really, really important.
What we always say is your purpose doesn't make your decisions easy, but it makes them clear.
Yes.
It will help you decide what to do and what not to do. And I also want to say something because I use the language noble purpose. If people are thinking, well, I'm not, feeding the poor, I'm not, curing cancer. If customers are buying from you, if you've ever sold one thing to anyone, or if you're taking what you did in your last job and you're now doing it as an entrepreneur, you have a noble purpose. It is about making a difference to customers. One of our most successful clients is a concrete company, which you might not think concrete has noble purpose, but you try living your life without concrete. It'd be very hard. So, I mean, we've worked with accounting firms. One of our most successful clients was an IT company, and their noble purpose was we help small businesses be more successful. That was it. But once they got everybody in the company lined up around helping their customers, small businesses, be more successful, it was a game changer.
Yeah, and as you say, people. Yeah, Simon Sinek always says like you have to have a cause, and that has to be clear. But people, if you have your cause clear, then people can align behind that, and they can if their cause is very similar to yours, then you're going to attract those right people into your
That's right.
company as well. So it's just, yeah, I love everything you're saying. Thank you so much.
Well, what noble purpose does for an entrepreneur is it does the two things that are crucial for a business. It creates competitive differentiation, which shows the market why you're different, why you're special, and it creates emotional engagement. And you cannot have passionate customers unless you have passionate employees. So it gives you as a leader to create that emotional engagement. And the first person you need to create it with is you.
Fantastic. So you've talked a lot about selling, and you've given us so much value already that I know our listeners can already go and start acting upon, or start certainly thinking differently about their approach to sales and what it means to them and their clients. And of course, I'm sure, I know I'm definitely going to rush out and buy your book and be tapping into that framework and applying that. But is there any other piece of advice that, before we wrap up here, that you would like to pass on to female entrepreneurs?
I would like to say one thing. You don't have to choose between making money and making a difference. You can have both, and you deserve both. We all deserve that.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you. And for anyone who is out there on the road heading to their sales meeting, listening to this, how can they find you? I'll put all your details in the show notes underneath, but for anyone who can't quite get to the web page right now, how can they continue this conversation?
You can follow me on LinkedIn. We do videos every single week, and they're free. And we put out you can subscribe to our Work on Purpose newsletter on LinkedIn. That's free as well. And of course, I would love it if people would buy the book. And if you are not a reader, we have the Audible is there, and I read it. So I poured my heart and soul into this, people. I read the book to you. So I hope people will like it.
Great. And for anyone who does buy the book, come into our community, the Driven Female Entrepreneur Club on Facebook, and let us know what did you take away from that book? What are you starting to apply? What have you learned from that? Let's share our tips and encourage each other as we go forward and start selling with noble purpose. Lisa,
Thanks.
thank you so much for joining us today.
It was such a pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation and I love your community.
Thank you.